So you're very welcome to our Breaking the Pain Cycle webinar series. My name is Gráinne O'Leary and I'm Chief Executive in Arthritis Ireland. So delighted to be here with you this evening. And I'll be introducing you to our two speakers this evening in a minute. But just to go through a few things before I hand over to them. So just a little bit about us as Arthritis Ireland. You may have heard this before, but just to let you know, for those of you that are joining us for maybe the first time this evening, we're the national charity for people living with arthritis, and we really are the go-to place for people living with arthritis. So we'd encourage you to, avail of all of our support, training and education and information that we have available, and indeed to contact our national helpline, which is open Monday to Friday, 10 to 4, for all types of practical information and emotional support. You can find out more about what we do and also to register for courses. And you'll see the number there on the screen. So you can contact our helpline on 0818 252 846. Okay, so really encourage people tonight to contact our helpline. As you know, this Breaking the Pain Cycle webinar series is for people living with pain that's associated with their arthritis diagnosis. And tonight's session is going to run for approximately 1 hour. And we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So if you have questions, as you hear from the speakers during their presentations, do pop the question into the question box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible later on. Also, if you do wish to take a screenshot or a photograph of any slides that you find interesting, you can do that as well. Tonight's webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel as well, and we'll be emailing the link to people who have registered after tonight's session as well. So you'll be able to log on to our YouTube channel and watch it again if you want, or you can tell maybe somebody who wasn't able to come tonight that it's available on our YouTube channel. Okay, and I'll cover actually these bits at the end of the session. But for now, what I'm going to do is introduce you to our two speakers for tonight, and I'm delighted to welcome Professor Suzanne McDonough and Jenny Ashton from the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, who are going to take us through tonight's topic. So you're very welcome, ladies, and I'll hand over to you now.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Gráinne. So we're delighted to be here, and I'll just share my slides. So maybe you can just let me know when you can see them full size. Can everybody see those?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Brilliant. That's great. So we're going to be talking to you about the role of exercise and physical activity in pain. And just to give you a little bit about background about us. So my name's Suzanne McDonough. I'm a physio by background, and I'm the head of the RCSI School of Physiotherapy. And I'm also the principal investigator on the Maintain Activity and Arthritis program. So this is a funded grant which is funded by the HRB and Arthritis Ireland. And I'm going to, I can chat to you a little bit about that at the end of my talk. And then I'd like to introduce you to Jenny Ashton, who is a teacher practitioner in the School of Physiotherapy and is also a clinical specialist in rheumatology and orthopedics. So this is the plan for what we're going to talk about over the next time period. And I'd say we're going to talk for probably about 35 minutes, and that should leave us lots of time for questions. So as we're going through this, feel free to put your questions into the chat box, and then we can answer them at the end. So I'm just going to start off with some definitions just to make sure we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. So just starting off with physical activity. So physical activity is defined as bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles that requires energy expenditure. And you can see here physical activity on a continuum here, starting with the lowest level of energy expenditure, which is sleep, then moving up to sedentary. So sedentary is defined as sitting or lying activity during the day, and that's tends to have very low levels of energy expenditure. Then moving up to light physical activity, and then moderate to vigorous physical activity. And in terms of sort of the science behind physical activity, most of what we know is around the health benefits of moderate to vigorous physical activity. But we're starting to learn more about the benefits of light physical activity and also the independent benefits of sedentary behavior. So it's important not only to be physically active, but also to try and reduce your amount of sitting time. And I will talk about that as we go through my slides. So physical activity, and I often get asked this question, what do you mean by physical activity? Well, physical activity involves every movement that you do with your body. So it involves things like doing your housework, traveling, whether you cycle, walk, or find some other way to travel to work. So kind of active travel, any activities you might enjoy like sport, dancing. So it covers every possible option in terms of using your body to increase your energy expenditure. And this all counts. So when I'm talking about, how much physical activity is recommended, all of these activities count towards that. Whereas exercise is much more specific. So exercise is a subset of physical activity. It is structured, planned, repetitive, and it's designed really to improve or maintain strength or cardiovascular fitness. And often what happens is that we might go to an exercise class for a short period of time and then stop doing it. So sometimes doing an exercise class on its own might not be enough to help us to be more active day to day in our lives. So what are the benefits of physical activity? There are well-established benefits for physical activity, and they're defined here in this slide for children, adults, and older adults. And you can see that there's moderate or strong evidence for the health benefits of being more active. So if I just give you some examples, if we are more active, it helps to reduce our risk of stroke and heart disease. It helps to manage hypertension, type 2 diabetes. It can help prevent and manage a range of different cancers. And it's also very good for our mental health. So there are lots of benefits to our mental health. So physical activity not only helps to prevent us getting these health conditions, but when we have these health conditions, it will help us manage them. And certainly we'll be talking about, how we can use exercise and physical activity to help you to manage your arthritis, but also by being more active, it will also reduce your risk of getting other health conditions in the future. So this is quite a nice infographic. I like it because what it shows you is both the immediate benefits of being more active. So a single bout of moderate to vigorous physical activity, and I'll explain to you, I think in the next slide, what I mean exactly by that. You can see that it'll help improve your sleep. It will help to make you less anxious, and it will also help with your blood pressure. So these are sort of short-term immediate effects of being more active. And then these go alongside the sort of longer-term benefits to all of the sort of systems, your brain, heart, healthy weight, bone strength effects that you get if you are physically active more long-term. So how much physical activity should we be doing? Well, because physical activity is so important for our health, most countries have national guidelines. And these are the physical activity guidelines from the UK. And the reason I'm sharing these is because they're more up to date than the Irish guidelines. And the Irish guidelines are being updated actually at the moment. It should be available next year. But there are three aspects to these guidelines. So the first aspect is that we should be moving more. We should be doing at least 150 minutes per week of physical activity. We should be building strength. We should be doing strength on at least 2 days a week. And Jenny's going to talk to you more about that. And that we should be trying to minimize the amount of time that we spend sitting. And I'm going to touch on that. So I'm going to take the first aspect about moving more. So what the guidelines say is at least 150 minutes per week at moderate intensity. And some of you might be wondering, well, what does that mean? What is moderate intensity? So just going back to the continuum of energy expenditure that I already showed you, so starting at sleep and going right up to moderate vigorous. So moderate physical activity is where you're moving and you're starting to breathe a little bit faster. You're starting to feel a little bit warmer. So you're moving along and maybe you're thinking, oh, I maybe need to take my jacket off or take my jumper off. And your heart rate is starting to go up. Now, obviously, some of those things are hard to maybe judge yourself. So often what we talk to people is, the talk test. So you're working at a moderate level when you can still hold a conversation with someone. And when you move into vigorous, it's much harder to have a conversation. So when you're out for a walk with your friend and you're going up that hill, you might suddenly both become very quiet because you've actually shifted your physical activity level into that sort of vigorous level of physical activity rather than moderate. So moderate, you definitely notice some effects. You start to feel a little bit warmer. You're breathing a little bit harder, but it's still easy to have a conversation. So that's a good guide on knowing sort of the intensity of physical activity. And this just gives you an idea of different activities that you might do that are related to different types of intensity. So, sedentary, sitting at work, sitting on your sofa in the evening, maybe watching your Netflix, your very low levels of energy expenditure, and then moving to light. So one of the examples here is yoga. I have to say, I go to a yoga class that I'm not sure is light intensity. So it will vary depending on what you're doing. But you can see here then moderate sort of walking, cycling, shopping, vigorous, maybe swimming, and then going right up to very vigorous. So, for example, sprinting up hills. And really what the guidelines are saying is that you're really trying to build in this sort of at least moderate activity, and that walking is one of the ways, and probably the simplest way for most of us to actually meet that guideline. So obviously the 150 minutes is in the guidelines, and I've done a lot of research on walking as a means of increasing physical activity across a whole range of clinical populations. So you can see there at the top that I've done quite a bit of work on people who've got painful conditions, so low back pain and osteoarthritis, but also other conditions like respiratory conditions, stroke, older adults, and people with severe mental health difficulties. And I would say that pretty much across the board, most people, when we start working with them, are very far away from 150 minutes. And I usually wouldn't even talk to them about the guideline of 150 minutes because it can be really demotivating. And people are really doing a lot less than that. And I think really what the focus then is for many people who have a health condition is to really think about where are you at the moment? Are you doing a lot of sitting at the moment? And maybe then to start off, you're just trying to move from sedentary into some light physical activity. And then maybe when you're happy with the amount of light you can do, then you can start to shift into some moderate physical activity. But it's really about thinking about where are you at this point in time, and then maybe just moving up a category on this scale. And this diagram, I think, is very helpful just to summarize the health benefits of physical activity. So I'm just going to orientate you to it. So along here, we have increasing health benefits. So this is on the y-axis. And along the x-axis, we have minutes of physical activity. And this yellow line is the 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity. And it's kind of an arbitrary line. So you can see here, this is the relationship. So this is the increasing health benefits with the more minutes you do of moderate to vigorous physical activity. And then 150 minutes is kind of just this line that's chosen, which is an amount that looks like it gives us quite a lot of benefit, and it's not quite plateauing out. But the important thing to highlight on this is really the fact that this relationship between health benefits and minutes of physical activity is not linear. And actually what you see is most health benefit for people who are very inactive, making small changes to become more active. So I really want to emphasize how important it is that, starting, if you feel at the moment you're not doing a whole lot, just even a small amount more will really have considerable health benefits for you. And this is also summarized. These are the WHO guidelines, which are a bit more recent than the UK guidelines. And they're really emphasizing that any movement is better than none. So often I get asked the question, okay, so you've talked to me about minutes, but everybody's talking about this 10,000 steps, and what's the relationship between minutes and steps? So this is just to show you some data to just show the relationship. So what we're seeing here is, again, we're seeing health benefits. So a reduction means that there's, in this case, means there's a health benefit to being more active. And this is the data for people who are over 60 years. And what we're seeing here is the number of steps along the x-axis. And what I'm going to point out to you here is, if we're following this blue line, we can see at about 3,000 steps, this is 3,000 steps per day, we can see that we're starting to see some health benefits to being more active, and that we start to see there's a dose response up to about 6,000 steps. So if you're 60 years or over, what they're recommending is about 6,000 steps for health benefit, but obviously less would also give you health benefit. And just to point out, this is for healthy populations, so not people with health conditions. Now, if we then look at the data then for people who are under 60 years of age, we can see that actually people who are younger need to be doing a little bit more for health benefit. So we can see that, again, a reduction in this case is seeing increased health benefit and steps, again, along the x-axis. And we see that at about 5,000 steps, we're starting to see some health benefits, and this plateaus at about 8,000 steps. So this is really saying that if you're less than 60 years, then maybe your target is about 8,000 steps. This is very much, as I said, for healthy populations. So what about people who've got health conditions? So what this graph is showing us is the number of daily steps in three groups. So in people with rheumatoid arthritis, in axial spondyloarthropathies, and then a control group. And just you can see here that actually there's quite the biggest number of people in both groups are pretty similar to the controls in terms of the number of steps they're doing daily. So we can see here that people are doing about 6,000 steps. A lot of people doing about 6,000 steps every day. And then the next sort of biggest group are doing about 8,000 steps per day. But we obviously have people also doing much less. So we've some people doing, about 3,000 steps, and then much smaller numbers who are much less active than that. And this group were part of a study that followed people longitudinally over 3 months and measured their physical activity every day. And these were people who had long-standing disease, and 50% of them were on biologics, and 83% of this particular population had rheumatoid arthritis. So you can see here that people with long-standing rheumatoid arthritis, by and large, are actually able to carry out about 6,000 to 8,000 steps every day. But obviously during flares, they also looked at what happened when somebody had a flare up their condition. Obviously, their numbers of steps will drop down, and Jenny will talk about that. But, obviously when you have a flare, you're going to reduce the amount of physical activity that you do. And in this study, they reduced it by about 10 to 15 minutes per day. But again, we do actually know much less about how many steps people with health conditions should do. And I'm just showing you this graph again, just to emphasize that what we do know, though, is that there is a clear dose response, and that people who are at the lowest levels of physical activity have most to gain from being a little bit more active. And just to finish this discussion, this is just showing you data from another study that, again, was looking at older women, so 12,000 older women, so quite a big population. And again, this drop here is showing that there's a health benefit to being more active. And we can see that we start to see this drop at a little as 2,500 steps per day. But obviously, if you do more, you can see like up to about 6,000, we're starting to see more benefit to that. So how then does physical activity become part of your life? And I'm well aware there's probably many people in the audience who may be just about to start being active, or you have been active in the past, and then you're finding maybe your condition is getting in the way. So certainly all the work that I've done is we have been really trying to understand where people start from. And the way that we've done that is to either use very simple pedometers, so that sit on your waist and get people to measure how much they're able to do in a week, or you can use a wrist-worn device as well, and many of you might have that, like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, and actually find out how much people are able to do day to day. Some days you'll have days where you do more than other days, and really trying to understand people's patterns of behavior. And what are the barriers that might, prevent them from being active, and trying to think ahead then as to how might you overcome some of those barriers. And Jenny will talk about that in more detail. But certainly I found this is a very powerful tool just to actually measure what you're doing in your days and find out, what your profile looks like. And then just to remember, again, people talk about this 10,000 steps. But actually, if you think about 150 minutes, that works out like, say, 30 minutes on 5 days a week. And 30 minutes is about 3,000 steps. So the 10,000 steps is not a scientific number. It has no real basis. So I would, and again, if you're pretty inactive at the moment, what I'd say to you is start really small. So you might only be saying, well, I'm going to commit to doing like a 5 or 10 minutes in the first instance on a daily basis, just to get started, and then build up from there. Now, if you are someone who is already quite active, then there is clear benefits to walking more quickly, and that's particularly for people who are thinking about their heart health. And obviously most pedometers will just measure every step. So it'll measure the shuffling steps, it will measure, the steps that maybe when you're just walking around your house and you're not maybe picking up any speed. This particular app called Active 10, I'd really recommend for people who want to actually figure out how much walking they're doing, which is beneficial for your heart. So this is kind of brisk walking. So this would be walking at a moderate pace. And this app will actually give you that information, and you can set goals then about the amount of walking that you do for your heart health. So really nice and easy to use and download onto your phone. Obviously, other ways to start to get active, again, for those of you who are new to what Arthritis Ireland have an offer, they have a Be Active with Arthritis program. So this is a physiotherapy designed and led 1-hour class that is held every once a week for 6 weeks, and that's a really good way to start to build some physical activity into your days. The other thing I would say is that if you feel at the moment that you're very inactive, maybe what you need to think about is starting by reducing the amount of sitting that you do during the day, and really trying to break it up. And I think the challenge we have is that we all live in environments that are completely designed around sitting. So we get into our car and we drive to work, we sit at our desk in our office, and then when we come home in the evening, we relax by sitting and watching TV or using our screens. So I think we have to be a little bit inventive about how we might break up our sitting time. So if you are at work, ways to think about it, and I've certainly found this a huge benefit, this centralized photocopiers, centralized waste baskets, that you take the opportunity to fit in those short walks. If you feel you're able, maybe go up one flight of stairs, or go the furthest photocopier that's away from you, and try and just build physical activity into your days. This is just an example of a fairly inexpensive way to make your desk a sit-to-stand desk. So this is Ailish Malone, so one of the lecturing staff in our school, and you can just see that this device just goes up and then it can go back down again. So that's just a quite nice way to build up in some standing time in your days. And just to flag up to you some of the dangers of prolonged sitting. So if you're sitting for more than 2 hours at a time, it does have effect on all of these measures. So if these are things that are of particular concern to you, then I would definitely try and build in some sitting breaks within your day. And when I'm talking about a sitting break, there seems to be some evidence that it's enough to literally get up out of your chair and sit back down again. So I'm going to hand over to Jenny now, who's going to talk to you about practical tips for being more active.
Thanks, Suzanne. I'm just checking you can hear me okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I'm going to talk about exercise and physical activity in relation to inflammatory arthritis. And I know that Dr. O'Shea was talking about fibromyalgia, osteoarthritis and low back pain. And in reality, a lot of these, the aspects I'm talking about, they will apply to other conditions as well. And we know that exercise and physical activity, it's in every guideline about management. It's an essential part of arthritis management. However, they've also shown that the guidelines are quite daunting for people sometimes. As Suzanne has mentioned, that 150 minutes, especially if someone who is inactive, that it is quite hard, that we need to start slowly and build up. And I think certainly with inflammatory arthritis patients, we do see clinically, we have kind of two groups of patients. So we have older patients who had no access to biologics. They may have a lot of joint damage. They may have had replacement surgeries. And it's still okay. We know it's safe for these people to exercise to reduce further risk of joint damage and to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. We also know as well that we have a younger group of patients that may have been recently diagnosed. They have access to biological medication, and we really want to try and maximize their function and get people back to doing what they loved doing before. And the whole kind of treat to target, treat people to remission, exercise can really help people get back to doing what they did before. And just important to know that exercise is for life. So in order to maintain the benefits, we need to keep going. Thanks, Suzanne. You can move on.
Sorry, Jenny, it's just a bit slow. Bear with me. Oh, yeah, sorry, there you go. I missed that little bit, but I think you're on to the next slide now. Yeah.
So why should you be physically active or exercise with inflammatory arthritis? And we have really good data that exercise improves cardiovascular function. It makes our bones stronger, makes our muscles stronger, and it has been shown to reduce both disease activity and reduce those inflammatory markers. Now, it doesn't replace certainly biological medication, but it is a really good adjunct to get people back to functioning well. It's been shown to reduce fatigue, to help with maintaining a healthy weight. It has been shown to have some effect on a positive effect on anxiety and depression. And I guess what we all want to know, it has been shown to reduce pain. It just is important to make sure that it is dose dependent. So as Suzanne was saying, that if you are sedentary, we want to move you to light, but you also, if you do some exercise, we want to maybe move you up into the moderate category. We know from the data that lots of people who have inflammatory arthritis, they're not as active as people who don't have arthritis of a similar age. And I think it's really positive, and hopefully people, it's a real take-home message that in a lot of the studies, or all the studies that they've done, obviously where exercise has been in a very controlled and safe environment, it does not appear to progress or accelerate joint damage. And often the people whose joint damage did progress, it was due to aggressive disease and not the exercise. So I think that's really reassuring for people, that if you exercise in a safe and controlled way, that your joints are, they're not at risk of further damage. And the reasons why people don't or find it hard to exercise are often some of the benefits. So fear of joint damage, fatigue, worsening pain, a lack of confidence or motivation, purely finding the time to exercise, financial, for joining the gym, which you don't need, and other medical conditions. So people may have other conditions like asthma or heart disease, things like that. So you've decided to start exercising. So how to build a habit? And I think Suzanne has spoken a fair bit about this already. So it's really important that you pick an activity that you enjoy, or else you just won't stick at it. And that's different for everybody. It's important to set a goal, and as physiotherapists, we might try and suggest that you pick a goal that's maybe not pain focused, because we know the pain, lots of people will have pain every day. and pick something more activity related, like you want to walk the dog for a certain amount of time, or you want to be able to walk to the shops or for coffee. Recruit a friend or a family member. It's really enjoyable going for a walk with someone else, catching up on day-to-day life. And it can sometimes help you go out on days like today where the weather's awful and you still need to get out and have a walk or do some exercise. For some people, a reward works. So, you know, you have your goal, and if you meet it, that you might reward yourself with a new piece of clothing or something like that. Again, that depends on what you decide what you want to do. And it's really important that you do have a plan, that you decide what maybe that you want to exercise, or you go for a walk 3 times a week, and, you know, write it down, put it on your calendar. And that's a really good way of helping you build a habit. And lastly, is to think about what barriers that you might face. So and think about this before you start, rather than trying to deal with them when you meet one. So if you know what to do in a flare, things like that, that you do think about what you might do if something happens. And again, what if it makes my pain worse? Well, I think it's really important to start slowly and build from there. So pacing is really, really important. And especially if you have been, if you've had, you know, a recent flare, or you've had a lot of pain recently, it is okay to accumulate bouts of exercise during the day. So shorter walks or shorter bursts of activity. And it's important that you listen to your body. So your body is good at telling you if you're doing too much. And we would certainly now, the research is telling us that a small amount of pain, of tolerable pain, is acceptable, provided that it settles quickly after the exercise has been completed. So things like the couch to 5K, either walking or running, are really good ways of building up your tolerance to exercise. And try not to be too physically active close to bed, and that's purely for sleep hygiene, because sometimes it can wake you up. This is a really nice study where they interviewed lots of patients with rheumatoid arthritis, and I just put a few quotes scattered in. And when my joints hurt, it can be extremely difficult to get going, but when my whole body gets moving, I don't feel the pain the rest of the day. My energy gets better and the fatigue disappears a bit. So I think that's a really nice way, what someone has said about a positive experience of physical activity and exercise. And this is what we use, like nearly like a traffic light system. So you can see this is a pain scale. So 0 being no pain and 10 is unbearable or really, really severe pain. So in that green, now I know pain is very unique to everybody. Everyone feels pain differently. But generally, if you feel the pain is kind of lower than a 2, that's a green light, that's okay to go. If you're heading kind of between kind of that 2 and 5, you're into that amber category. So it's, if that pain settles, that's okay to exercise. And really above that, that you may need to look at what you're doing. Are you doing too much? Maybe you need to have a rest day and exercise on alternate days. And that's where this traffic light system can really help people kind of with their pacing. And remember, when you start exercising, sometimes for people, initial increase in their pain is actually normal, but then as they keep exercising, that their pain will reduce. And can I exercise in a flare? And the answer is yes, you can. So if you may find you need to modify your exercise or your physical activity levels during a flare. Like, for example, as Suzanne was saying, you might need to reduce the length of time of a walk. If you're doing an exercise with weights, you might reduce the number of repetitions, or do your exercises. I know Suzanne was telling us to stand, but in this case, you can do your exercises in sitting rather than standing. You may consider other adjuncts like heat or cold, or you may have a support that you like to use. And just remember, there are very few instances where we generally, and I think Dr. O'Shea said this as well, where generally it's not safe to exercise or be active. But if you have concerns over swelling in a joint or joints, or an extreme exacerbation of your symptoms, it is really important that you do contact your GP or rheumatologist, which I'm sure you're all aware of, just to get checked out and make sure that your medication doesn't need reviewing first before you get back to doing what you enjoy. And again, I think this is a really nice quote, that I've found that having varying workouts allows me to adapt the ups and downs of my rheumatoid arthritis, meaning that I don't always have to put my life on hold every time it flares. And obviously I see lots of people who've got foot pain with arthritis. So my feet hurt when I walk, can I keep going? Because I think lots of people enjoy walking. And if the rest of your joints are okay, then that's okay to walk, but you might need to look at your footwear. And we would generally advise that you do have a moderately stiff soled shoe. So basically a shoe that doesn't bend in the middle, and some cushioning in it. So a good runner or walking shoe. You might need to use an insole, and you can buy at a start, you can buy an insole in a chemist. A support insole, or if not, you can seek a referral to a physiotherapist or a podiatrist to be assessed for one. And generally would say pace your walks, break them up. You might choose to use, if you're hill walking, some poles just to offload your feet a little bit, or consider alternatives while your feet are sore, so cycling. And then, so what exercise or physical activity, what can I do? And I think this is the last quote I think I have. So it's really important for me to stay active, regardless of pain. I move as much as I can all the time, cleaning my house, fixing the roof, and working in my garden. I do not just sit. So different exercises. So you may choose a low impact exercise. So walking, swimming, cycling. Now I put the outdoor swimming there. I met a very an amazing lady with rheumatoid arthritis relatively recently, and she took up sea swimming, and she swam rain, hail, or sunshine. She thought it was she really found it helped her symptoms, and she was hooked after a couple of weeks. And I put at the bottom then into our more vigorous activity. And I think lots of people were told that they have to stop vigorous activity, but with our advances in medication now, there are lots of people that exercise at a very high level. Now, they may need support to get to that level. And I just picked that hockey player. I'm a hockey player myself, and she played at a very high level, and she got back to playing after her rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis. And for any tennis lovers, Caroline Wozniacki is played in the American Open this year after coming out of retirement, and she also has rheumatoid arthritis. So I think it's really nice role models to have for us if you're somebody who's young and was previously very active. And there's just some examples of our daily chores that need to get done. And then strengthening exercises. So what do we mean by strength? So a strengthening exercise is anything that improves our strength on at least, and they recommend that we do it at least 2 days a week. Now, for us, they recommend we strengthen the big muscle groups. So that's the big muscles in our arms, our legs, and our trunk. And we need to overload the muscles with some kind of resistance, and it should be progressive. Now, what we mean by progressive is we make it harder by increasing the time we do it, or increasing the weight. Now, often a resistance can be your body weight. It doesn't have to be in a gym. So you can see here we have sit to stand, you going up and down stairs. So you can use things like weights, your tins of beans, or simple things like carrying your shopping. So trying to find ways of building your strength work into your day. I always tell people of like brush their teeth exercises. So you brush your teeth twice a day. Why not try and think of slipping in your exercises in that time as well? And then just really a little bit about weight and exercise or physical activity. And healthy weight is advised, obviously, as part of your management for inflammatory arthritis. And we know, especially with the rheumatoid, we do sometimes see this rheumatoid cachexia where the muscle unfortunately gets replaced by fat. So it's really important that we can do some strength work to kind of help with that. And we can move on there, Suzanne, thanks. And then just finally, I'm really worried about exercising or increasing my physical activities. What can I do? So sometimes I'd see people who've tried to be more active and they've really found it hard because of various reasons. Now, I guess the good thing about inflammatory arthritis certainly is you do have regular access to your rheumatologist, or most people are seen every 6 months. So I would encourage you that if you do feel you need some help, that ask for a referral to physiotherapy, and they can advise you. They have done studies where people have said that it's not discussed at clinic level. So do bring it up with your doctors, and they can either give you some advice or refer you to a physiotherapist for more. And sometimes people need a course of treatment first. They may need some targeted exercises or other treatments before they start doing more physical activity or exercise. They have reported, sorry, just go back for a second, as well, that often acceptance of arthritis can help people move forward, that have accepted that they have a condition that they need to manage. And often people who were previously very active before their diagnosis found it easier to get active once they started treatment. So, you know, people who are more sedentary or not physically active, they may need a little bit more help to get there. And support by healthcare professionals, they've shown, can help people with setting goals, with kind of moving through barriers, and to help with self-management, which is obviously very important for our arthritis as well. And then just to finish off, that we all have these well-intended plans of getting exercising and we're just going to reach our goal straight away and keep going for life. And we know in reality that that doesn't happen, and that we have ups and downs. But as long as we're getting there, then that's always a positive sign. And just to finish off with, I just want you to encourage you to sit less and move more, and that we should be looking to start that today and not tomorrow. So thank you very much, and I'm just going to pass you back to Suzanne.
Great, thanks, Jenny. And I just wanted to finish. I'd mentioned about the research that we're doing with Arthritis Ireland, and this just really is a call out to people who have participated in the Be Active with Arthritis program. So we're really keen to hear your thoughts on the program and how you found being active since the program ended. So if you would like to participate in this research or find out more, you can get in touch with Dr. Eva Stevenson, who is the researcher on that team and is working very closely with me. And the second call out, if we happen to have any physios who are listening in, we also would like to speak to physios who have delivered the Be Active with Arthritis, and the same contact details there with Eva Stevenson, or people can reach out directly to myself. So I think we've got to the question time now. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and then we're happy to answer any questions that people have.
Okay, and just a reminder for people, we do have some questions in the box here, which I'm going to put to our speakers now in a minute. But if you have other questions, do type them into the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen on the ribbon there. So do put in your questions. So I'll come to our first question, and this person was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis last year. They used to jog and run prior to the onset of their RA. What are your thoughts on running with RA? I would like to get back to doing my 5K runs, but don't want to cause any long-term issues. Now, I know you addressed some of that in your talk, but I mean, I think it's a really good opportunity to reinforce some of that messages, because this is something we certainly hear a lot and get asked a lot about in Arthritis Ireland as well.
Jenny, I'm going to let you take that one.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's a great idea. You know, and you know, if you haven't run in a while, I would certainly recommend that you do something like a couch to 5K, so that you really start pacing yourself. You use kind of the traffic light system for your pain. And I think if you are relatively newly diagnosed, you might just need to have that conversation with your rheumatologist first, just that they've checked that they're happy that you're in a stable, you know, that your medication is working and that you're in a stable place, especially if you have been very symptomatic before your diagnosis. I think that's always a good place to start, because obviously it can sometimes take a few months for the biological medication to kick in. So I think that's a conversation to have first, but I 100% would recommend, you know, if you're feeling well and your arthritis is well controlled, there's no reason why you can't get back to doing your 5K runs.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. So our next question, so this person has post-COVID fibromyalgia. They'd like to be able to exercise, but long COVID, PESE, so post-exertion symptom exacerbation. So even with a little gentle exertion or physical exercise results in kind of a long COVID crash, which is an extreme relapse. Is there a solution to this problem? So not sure if
I might just say something, and then I don't know if Jenny's anything to add. I mean, I always think it's good to know how much someone is actually, you know, how much that person is doing day to day. So I don't know, I mean, you can do it several ways. You can just keep a notebook, but if you had some way of measuring what you were doing, like with a wearable, or even just a very inexpensive pedometer, because sometimes it's helpful to see the patterns of your movement. Sometimes people find that you know, they're better being doing their activity in the morning times, or just trying to find when's the best time energetically for them, so they can kind of minimize you know, that sort of effect of it, and then obviously building up really, really gradually. But it sounds like in this instance, I'd imagine some support from a clinician would probably really help. So Jenny, I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, I would presume someone like this would be involved in a post-COVID clinic. I know I'm not an expert certainly on some of the post-COVID symptoms that have been really severe for people, and it's really challenging because obviously initially you're told not to physically exert yourself. So I do think linking in with a clinic, and it is a slow it's a slow process, but I do think, you know, that once they can medically clear you to check that there's no other reasons for you not to try and slowly increase your physical activity, I would agree with Suzanne that you probably need to find a baseline and need maybe a little bit of support to improve.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So our next question is something, again, that did come up in your talk, but again, the question here is slightly nuanced. So this person has osteoarthritis in their knee and hand. They run 3 times a week and they do a strength and weights class. This person has quite a bit of pain while doing the activity, but loves the mental benefits of exercise, but does worry if they're doing long-lasting damage to their knee, as an MRI says that there's just no cartilage there. So the question is really, will this person regret it in the future? And, you know, are they doing damage by running through the pain?
Jenny, I'm going to let you take this one again.
Yeah, well, if someone told me that I couldn't run, I think I would be very, I find it really hard. So, you know, I think you have to go back to what Barry, if you saw Barry or Dr. O'Shea's lecture a few weeks ago, and he showed the picture of the knees of where we had the bone-on-bone arthritis and the person that had no pain, and the person with a very normal looking knee, really with quite severe pain. So we know that the level of changes in your knee doesn't necessarily dictate the symptoms. I would, however, consider that you might need to modify a little bit the fact that you're reporting quite severe levels of pain. And, you know, I think the traffic light system, using something like that, like, we don't want you to stop. I think that's a really important message. Like, it's really important, as you can say, the mental health side of it, and even the physical side, but maybe using something like the traffic light system, maybe giving yourself like a rest day, and just looking at things like your footwear, where you run, and you know, that's kind of a decision, I guess, that you have to make yourself, whether you feel that those symptoms are too severe, that you might need to consider just changing the type of exercise that you do. But, you know, certainly I think modifying but keep going, I think, would be the message.
Now, another osteoarthritis question. So this person has osteoarthritis in their back, neck and knee. They can get very bad flare-ups and sometimes struggle to stand up straight and can limp. And they struggle to get up the stairs. You know, when they feel like this, should they rest when this happens or try and move around?
I'm gonna reinforce what I know you're going to say, Jenny, which is doing some gentle moving actually will help. So I think, you know, if you're resting, you will just feel stiffer. So I think some gentle movement. So I don't think complete rest. But Jenny, if you want to add anything to that.
I think the pacing comes into that as well, that if the flares are where you have to go to nothing, that and you find it hard to move at all, I think you certainly may need to look, like what Suzanne was talking about by finding your baseline, what's triggering, maybe to see if there's anything that's triggering these flares, and really looking at that pacing side of things, you know, to really build up slowly. But generally speaking, the same with back pain, there are very few instances where exercising is unsafe to do.
Thanks. Here's a question about golf. So this person has osteoarthritis in their hands and plays golf, and they've been advised by their doctor that they should stop playing and take up a less impactful sport. And they're asking, would you agree?
Suzanne, do you want me?
Do you want to take that one?
Well, obviously we can't comment on, you know, as in if the doctor is given advice, that's, you know, the patient-doctor relationship. I can't comment on the on individual cases or things, but generally, you know, if the person is managing playing golf and they enjoy it, you know, then there's no reason not to stop. But maybe again needs to modify, you know, things like I certainly with hands that like the grip can be quite affected. I had a lady recently, she had a great like a battery operated buggy, so she wanted to walk, she didn't want to go in a golf buggy, but she found it really hard pulling her golf clubs, so things like that she managed to get. So she used that to still get her exercise and still was insisting on playing her 18 holes of golf. So yeah, so rather than, you know, I can't go against doctors' advice, but I think there are maybe ways of adapting if it's what you enjoy doing, you know, that's you might try things like that.
Another question here from somebody who has that they love walking, but they have plantar fasciitis that they just cannot get rid of, which makes it very painful. They also have RA. Any suggestions as to how they can overcome this and exercise?
I think this is you, Jenny, you're getting all the questions.
That's fine. Oh, I spend my days, well, certainly when I was in the hospital, I see so many people with plantar fasciitis. Or plantar fasciopathy, but unfortunately when you do have rheumatoid, we know that obviously you can have some inflammatory changes around those, well, your plantar fascia, it's not quite a tendon, but those tendon-like structures, and plantar fasciitis that doesn't settle is really hard to it's really about load management. It's so important. So we never tell, as I think you have gathered from the message, is not to rest completely, but sometimes it really is about trying to ease that load off for a little bit, and then slowly build it back up. Now, just to go through the things that you can try, that you may not have tried already. Obviously we do, and you have maybe given stretches or exercises to do. There is shockwave therapy that actually works very well for people where it doesn't settle, and that can be accessed through some physiotherapy departments. You can try an insole, but the load management, they are all adjuncts, and the load management is really a big part of it. So important, because obviously we want to try and get you walking, but you may need to just change your activity for a little bit. And there's lots of talk about people sometimes get injections, and I think it's really important just to get the message that a steroid injection really is only if it doesn't settle, that it's kind of a last choice of treatment unless you've tried everything else.
Thanks, Jenny. So a question from somebody who's just joined the webinar series today, and they've been experiencing pain mostly in their lower back for over a year now. Still hasn't got a definitive diagnosis, but no painkillers are working to reduce the pain. And when this person does exercise, it does help for a week or two, but after that, it just gets worse. You know, what can they do? They're pretty desperate as nothing seems to work for the pain.
Well, I might jump in first, and then Jenny, if you have anything to add. So I'm kind of interested that it seems to be working for a week or two. So it might just be that Jenny's talked about pacing, you know, that they're doing too much, and that's part of the problem. Certainly in the walking trials we've done with people with low back pain, we very gradually increased their step goal. And we often see this kind of boom and bust. So people start doing something, but then they just overdo it. So I think that the traffic light signal with the pain will help. And the other thing I'd just say about many people with low back pain, and there is no specific diagnosis for their low back pain. And often the reason they continue have pain is because they get very deconditioned. So actually being active and building up your muscles will really help long term. But it might be that you just actually need to get some support from a physio or another clinician just to help you navigate beyond the 2-week time period.
Okay. I'll just come back to another question, and I really probably only be able to take this other one, just one more. This again, it's kind of sport specific, and it's about somebody who's restarted playing badminton last year after about a 40-year gap. They really enjoy it, but they got a very stiff neck, and they do have arthritis in their neck. So now this person has stopped playing badminton completely, although she absolutely loves it, but she's had flares. So she's wondering, you know, how can she, or can she play it again, or how she can manage that situation.
You want me to take that one, Suzanne?
Back to that one of people doing things that they love.
I know, and I really hate telling people not, like, I think that's, you know, you get such enjoyment out of things that we enjoy doing. So certainly I think that she's probably, we get a little bit stiffer as we get older, and you know, if you've had a gap of 40 years, I would say that she probably just needs to look at her general flexibility and mobility of through her like neck, her shoulders, maybe even to her lower back and her legs, and might just need to do a little bit of exercise, or could maybe attend a few sessions of physiotherapy just to kind of get moving a little bit better. But certainly I would be very hopeful that she could try and go back to her badminton if she loves it after that, and she shouldn't have to stop.
Okay. I'm sorry that we have to wrap up. I know there's more questions, but I'm hoping that we've answered enough questions to help maybe some of the people that we haven't, unfortunately, we just have not had time to go to all of the questions. Do as well remember that this webinar this evening will be up on our YouTube channel. So there's some of the things that Suzanne and Jenny have mentioned there as well, that it might be good to kind of refresh by watching the webinar again. That might help you kind of address some of those issues. I'm just going to share my screen here just to show you, just to go through just in terms of what we're going to be doing for the rest of the series. So just to say that next week on the 26th of October, we will be having Dr. Elena Nikiforou from King's College in London, who'll be talking about pain, inflammation and diet. And then the following week, we'll be talking about pain and mental health with Dennis Ryan, psychotherapist. And then our last one is on the 9th of November. And that's that's called Living a Life with Pain, Communication, Relaxation and Finding Me with Laura Cattle, psychotherapist. So we've 3 more sessions to go. So we'd love to see you online next week and indeed on the following 2 weeks. And just as well to tell you that as a follow-on from this webinar series, we'd really encourage people to consider signing up for our Living Well with Pain program. This is a 6-week program. It's an evidence-based online program, and certainly an additional support to people living with pain that's associated with their arthritis. So it's, as I said, an evidence-based 6-week program, once a week for 6 weeks. To book your place, you can go onto our website, arthritisireland.ie. So it's, you know, 1 day a week for 6 weeks, 2.5 hours per session. Okay, and there will be a you know, a variety of days and times that are available as well. So please do consider signing up for that program. It's also a free program that we're offering for the 6 weeks. You can also sign up for our monthly e-zine with information on all our activities, courses, campaigns and events. So you'll get, you know, monthly notifications of what's coming up and what's happening within Arthritis Ireland. And again, you can sign up for that on our website. We also have a bi-monthly blog called Mindful Mondays. And that's also filled with tips and information on how to stay on top of your health and well-being. Certainly people have been really enjoying our bi-monthly blog, got really positive feedback. So that's something you can also receive. And we have our podcast series. So we've actually produced 2 series of our podcast, Inflammation Nation, and the links are all on our website as well. So maybe when you're out doing your walk or your physical activity, you might like to listen to Inflammation Nation. Also, remember our website's there for all sorts of information. We have our information booklets and a range of other information as well. So do access that. And of course, our YouTube channel. So all of the webinar series will be available on our YouTube channel, but there's also lots of other videos with experts, clinicians, and people living with arthritis. So a whole range of topics on our YouTube channel. So really encourage you to have a look at that as well. So that is kind of really what I wanted to you know, it just remains for me to thank you all for attending the webinar, and thanks to our sponsor Fresenius Kabi as well for supporting the series. And we wish you a very good week, and we'll see you next week at 7 p.m. sharp again. And just remember, if you have any questions in the meantime, you can call our helpline on 0818 252 846. And thank you everybody for joining us. Have a good evening.
Bye everybody.